He told a room full of people that someone like me was easy to replace. He said it casually, the way you say the weather is fine or the coffee is decent. He had no idea I had been recording the temperature in my apartment every morning for 11 months. Let me take you back to where this started. It was a Tuesday in late October, around 6 in the morning. I had just come off a 12-hour night shift at the hospital. My feet hurt in the specific way they hurt when you have been standing on hard floors since 7 the previous evening. I remember the light outside was that pale grey colour that never quite decides to become actual daylight. I took the bus home because my car was in the shop, and I sat in the back with my jacket pulled over my shoulders like a blanket, watching the city scroll past the window. I had been living in that apartment for 2.5 years at that point. 3rd floor, apartment 14, an old building on Feldkampstrasse in the western part of the city. High ceilings, decent bones, the kind of place that looks better in photos than it does in person. I had signed the lease in a hurry because I had just transferred to the new hospital position and needed something close to the transit line. The rent was high. I knew it was high. But I told myself it was worth it for the location, for the space, for the ceiling mouldings that made the place feel like it had a history. I told myself a lot of things in those early months. When I got home that Tuesday morning, the heating was off. Not turned down. Off. I could see my breath in the hallway. I stood in my kitchen with my coat still on and pressed my palm against the radiator the way you check a patient's forehead, half hoping you are wrong. Cold metal. I turned the thermostat up, heard nothing. Waited. Nothing. I checked the boiler panel in the utility closet and saw the error code blinking. The same one it had been showing on and off for the past 3 months. I made tea using hot water from the kettle because that was the only warm thing available. I sat down at my kitchen table, still in my work clothes, too tired to change, too cold to sleep, and I wrote a text message to my landlord, Rainer Voss. Rainer Voss. I want you to picture him clearly, because the picture matters. He was in his late 50s, always wore a pressed shirt, drove a silver SUV that he parked directly in front of the building entrance, even though there was a sign saying no stopping. He had the confident posture of a man who had never once had to ask someone else for something. His LinkedIn profile described him as a real estate entrepreneur, an urban development consultant. He had a small office in the nicer part of town with his name on the door in gold lettering. He was the kind of person who used the word investment the way other people use the word oxygen. His reply to my text came 4 hours later. It said, "We'll look into it." That was it. "We'll look into it." I had been sending variations of that same message for 3 months. Heating failure, water pressure issues, the black mold that had started appearing in the corner of the bathroom behind the towel rack. Every time, "We'll look into it." Or, "Contractor is scheduled." Or, my personal favourite, "These things take time in older buildings." I was a nurse. I knew exactly what mold did to respiratory systems. I knew what cold and damp did to joints, to sleep quality, to immune function. I was spending my nights keeping other people alive and coming home to an apartment that was actively working against my health. But here's the thing I had not yet fully understood in that first year. Rainer Voss was not neglecting the building out of incompetence or indifference. He was doing it deliberately, not in the sense that he sat down and planned each individual failure, but in the sense that he had made a calculated decision that maintenance was a cost and silence was free. He was charging a modernization surcharge on my rent, a legal mechanism that allows landlords to pass renovation costs onto tenants when they make genuine improvements to the property. He had added this surcharge after supposedly installing new windows and updating the electrical system. The windows were fine. The electrical work I could not verify. But the heating system that had been failing since before I moved in had never been touched. The ventilation in the bathroom that would have addressed the mold problem had never been touched. The surcharge was being paid every month by me, and the money was going somewhere that was not my building. I did not know the full picture yet, that October morning. I only knew I was cold and tired, and something was wrong beyond the obvious. I started keeping notes. It began small. I bought a cheap digital thermometer, €3 from a hardware store on the corner, and put it on the kitchen windowsill. Every morning when I came home from a night shift, or every morning when I woke up from a day shift, I wrote down the indoor temperature, the time, and the outdoor temperature from the weather app. I kept a separate document on my phone where I logged every message I sent to Voss and every reply I received with timestamps. I photographed the mold in the bathroom every 2 weeks. Same angle, same light, so you could see it spreading. I kept the original lease agreement, the modernization notice, and every rent receipt in a folder in my desk drawer. I was not planning anything yet. I was just a person who had learned, through years of shift work and patient documentation, that if you do not write it down, it did not happen. The second thing that shifted my understanding came in December. Voss sent a letter to all tenants in the building announcing a rent increase. Not a large one, technically within legal limits, but it came with a glossy one-page attachment describing upcoming improvements to the building's common areas, new lighting in the stairwell, a freshly painted facade, a modernized entry system. The letter had the same sleek formatting as a property brochure. It listed the building's address at the top with a small logo, Voss Immo. There was a photo of the building exterior that had clearly been taken in summer when the facade looked better. I read that letter at my kitchen table, in my coat, because the heating had been off for 4 days at that point. I went online that evening and looked up Voss Immo. It had a website with professional photography, testimonials from commercial tenants, and a page describing Rainer Voss as a visionary in sustainable urban housing. There was a press mention from a local business magazine calling him one of the most dynamic property developers in the region. There was a photo of him at some kind of gala, shaking hands with a city council member. I searched his name alongside the words tenant complaint, rent dispute, housing court. I found 3 separate cases in the public court register, all involving tenants from his other properties. 2 had been settled quietly. 1 had gone to judgment. A tenant had successfully argued that a modernization surcharge was unjustified because the described improvements had not been made. Voss had appealed. He lost the appeal. I sat with that information for a long time. Then I searched for a tenant rights organization in the city. I found one, a non-profit called Mieterhilfe, that offered free initial consultations. I made an appointment for the following week. The woman I met there was named Claudia. She was in her 40s, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had the particular calm of someone who'd heard every version of every landlord story that existed. I brought my folder. She went through it page by page without changing her expression. When she got to the modernization notice and then looked at my photos of the mold and my temperature log, she set the folder down and looked at me over her glasses. She said, "Do you have the original advertisement for the apartment, the one you responded to when you first applied?" I said I thought I might have saved it. She said, "Find it and keep doing exactly what you are doing with the documentation. Do not stop." I went home and searched my email archive. I found the original listing, forwarded from a housing platform, dated 2.5 years earlier. It described the apartment as fully modernized, energy efficient, and equipped with a contemporary heating system. I added it to the folder. January was the worst month. The heating failed completely for 11 days. I borrowed a space heater from a colleague at work. I slept in 2 pairs of socks and a sweater. I sent Voss a formal written notice by registered mail, citing the specific legal provisions around habitability and the landlord's duty to maintain heating systems. I kept the proof of delivery receipt. His response, also in writing, said the delay was due to parts availability and that he was doing everything possible. He used the phrase force of circumstances twice. I photographed that letter and added it to the folder. In February, something happened that changed the texture of everything. Voss announced he was showing the apartment below mine to prospective tenants. The woman who had lived there, an older woman named Frau Kettner, had given notice after her own heating issues had gone unresolved. I passed Voss in the stairwell on a Saturday afternoon. He was with 2 young professionals who were looking at the apartment. He was in his pressed shirt, all warmth and confidence, talking about the building's character and the neighbourhood's potential. He saw me on the stairs. He gave me a short nod. Then he turned back to the prospective tenants and said something I was not meant to hear, or maybe he did not care whether I heard it. He said, "The current tenants are mostly transitional. The building's profile is shifting. People like them are easy to find and easy to replace." He said it lightly, informational, like a fact about the building's plumbing. I kept walking up the stairs. I did not stop. I did not turn around. I went into my apartment, put my keys on the hook by the door, sat down at my table, and stayed very still for about 5 minutes. People like them. People like me. The nurse who had just worked a 10-hour Saturday shift. The person who had been paying full rent, including the modernization surcharge, every single month, on time, for 2.5 years, in an apartment with mold in the bathroom and a heating system that failed in winter. Easy to replace. I picked up my phone and called Claudia at Mieterhilfe. I got her voicemail. I left a message saying I was ready to move forward. The next step Claudia recommended was a formal expert assessment. Mieterhilfe had a relationship with a certified building assessor, a man named Dr. Hartmann, who conducted independent evaluations for tenant disputes. He came to my apartment on a Thursday morning in March. He spent 2 hours going through every room. He measured the moisture levels in the bathroom walls. He documented the mold growth with a professional camera. He tested the heating system and wrote a technical assessment of its condition. He noted that the ventilation in the bathroom was non-functional and that the window seals, despite the claim in the modernization notice, showed significant wear consistent with pre-2015 installation. His written report ran to 19 pages. It concluded that the apartment did not meet the habitability standards described in the lease, that the modernization surcharge was not supported by the documented improvements, and that the mold presented a genuine health risk under prolonged exposure. I read that report 3 times. Then I put it in the folder. The folder was getting heavy. Claudia filed a formal complaint with the Housing Authority on my behalf in April. She also filed a civil claim contesting the modernization surcharge and seeking rent reduction retroactively for the periods when heating had been non-functional. She told me the process would take time. She told me to be patient and to keep documenting. I was patient. I had 11 months of temperature logs. I knew how to wait. In May, I found out about the Stadtteilversammlung, the district public forum. The city district had been dealing with a growing housing crisis in that part of town. Rents had been rising sharply for 3 years. Displacement of long-time residents was becoming a visible issue, and the local government had announced a series of public forums to discuss housing policy. One of these forums was scheduled for the last Thursday of May at the community centre 4 blocks from my building. The agenda included a segment on modernisation surcharges and landlord accountability. Local journalists had been invited. City council members would be present. Members of the public were invited to speak. I saw the announcement posted in the stairwell of my building. Someone had put it up on the community bulletin board, probably Frau Kettner before she moved out. I registered to speak. I also, in the days before the forum, did one more thing. I searched the public subsidy database for housing renovation grants in the city. It was publicly accessible, part of a transparency initiative. I searched by property address. My building appeared in the database. Rainer Voss had received a public subsidy 2 years earlier, specifically for building modernisation, including heating system improvements and energy efficiency upgrades. The grant amount was substantial. The condition of receiving it was that the described improvements be completed within 18 months and that the building meet updated habitability standards. I printed that page from the database. I added it to the folder. The folder was now very heavy. I did not tell Voss I was speaking at the forum. I did not tell him anything. In the weeks before the event, he sent a building-wide notice about the new entry system being installed, as promised in his December letter. It was, I will give him that, actually installed. The stairwell lights were replaced. A fresh coat of paint appeared on the facade. The building suddenly looked from the outside like a place that was being cared for. The timing was interesting. The Thursday of the forum arrived. I had worked a day shift that ended at 4. I went home, showered, changed into clean clothes, and picked up the folder from my desk drawer. I stood in my kitchen for a moment. The heating was working that week. The city had sent an inspector from the Housing Authority after Claudia's complaint, and Voss had apparently decided that a functional heating system was suddenly achievable after all. The apartment was warm for the first time in months. I looked at the thermometer on the kitchen windowsill. 21 degrees. I had written down 17 degrees on more than 40 separate mornings over the past year. I put the folder under my arm and walked to the community centre. The room was full. I had not expected that. There were maybe 120 people there. Residents from the district, housing advocates, 2 local journalists with notebooks, 3 city council members at a table at the front. The air smelled like coffee and old radiators and the particular nervous energy of a public meeting where people had come because they were genuinely angry. I found a seat near the middle. I put my folder on my lap. Rainer Voss was there. I saw him when I came in. He was standing near the side wall, talking to someone in a suit, relaxed, doing the pressed shirt and confident posture thing. He had not seen me yet, or if he had not registered me as anything to pay attention to. The forum opened with remarks from a council member about the housing situation in the district. Then there were presentations from 2 housing policy researchers. Then the floor was opened for public comment. People spoke about rent increases, about displacement, about buildings in disrepair. The room had the weight of accumulated frustration. When my name was called, I walked to the front. I put my folder on the podium. I looked at the room. I said, "My name is Jonas Berger. I'm a registered nurse. I have lived at Feldkampstrasse 14, apartment 14, for 2 years and 8 months. I want to describe what that has looked like." I spoke for 12 minutes. I did not raise my voice. I described the heating failures with dates, durations, and temperatures. I described the mould with reference to Dr. Hartman's expert assessment. I described the modernization surcharge and the original listing's claims about the apartment's condition. I described the public subsidy Voss had received and the conditions attached to it. I described the 3 prior court cases that were part of the public record. I read one sentence from Voss's written response to my heating complaint, the one that used the phrase force of circumstances. I held up the folder and said that every document I had referenced was in it, and that I was happy to provide copies to the journalists, the council members, and the housing authority representative who I had been told was present. Then I said, quietly, a few months ago, the owner of this building told prospective tenants in a stairwell that the current residents were easy to replace. I want to say, for the record, that I am a nurse. I have worked through a pandemic. I have held the hands of people who were dying. I am not easy to replace, and I am not going away. I picked up the folder and walked back to my seat. The room was quiet for about 3 seconds. Then it was not quiet. I did not look at Voss while I spoke. I looked at him after I sat down. He had moved away from the wall. His face had the specific stillness of a person who is trying to decide very quickly what expression to wear. The man in the suit next to him had taken a small step sideways, the way people do when they sense that proximity to someone is about to become a liability. One of the journalists was already writing. The council member at the front table asked if the property owner was present and wished to respond. There was a pause. Voss raised his hand. He walked to the front. He was still wearing the confident posture, but something in it had gone slightly wrong, like a coat that no longer quite fits. He said the documentation I had presented was taken out of context. He said the heating issues had been complex technical problems in an older building. He said the modernization work had been completed in good faith. He said he had always acted within the law. A woman 2 rows behind me said, "Which law covers mould?" Somebody else said, "And the subsidy money?" The council member held up a hand for order. She said the specific matters raised would be referred to the housing authority for formal review. She said the subsidy question would be forwarded to the relevant funding body. She said the meeting would continue. Voss walked back to the side wall. He did not stay for the rest of the forum. I stayed for all of it. What came after was not fast, but it was thorough. The housing authority had already been conducting a review following Claudia's complaint. The forum gave it public visibility and political weight. The funding body that had issued the modernization subsidy opened its own inquiry. Dr. Hartman's expert report was submitted as evidence. My 11 months of temperature logs were submitted as evidence. The original property listing, the one describing the apartment as fully modernized and equipped with a contemporary heating system, was submitted as evidence. The 3 prior court cases were part of the public record. The civil claim Claudia had filed on my behalf went to hearing in September. The judge found in my favour on the modernization surcharge, ruling that the surcharge was not supported by documented completed improvements. I received a retroactive rent adjustment covering 22 months. The amount was not life-changing, but it was real, and it was mine. The subsidy inquiry concluded in October. The funding body determined that the conditions of the grant had not been met within the required timeframe, and that the documentation Voss had submitted as proof of completion was inaccurate. The subsidy was clawed back, with interest and a penalty. The amount was significant. It was, I was told later by Claudia, roughly equivalent to what Voss had collected in unjustified modernization surcharges across 3 of his properties over 4 years. 2 other tenants from buildings in Voss's portfolio had come forward after the forum, after seeing the coverage in the local newspaper. One of them had a similar mould problem. The other had a documented heating failure that had lasted 3 weeks in January. Claudia took both cases. Both resulted in findings against Voss. The City Council, at its next session, passed a motion requiring stricter documentation standards for modernisation surcharges in the district. It was a small change. It was not named after me, but it was real. Voss's Voss IMO website went offline sometime in November. His LinkedIn profile was still there for a while, still describing him as a visionary in sustainable urban housing. I checked it once, out of curiosity. Then I stopped checking. I moved out in December, not because I was forced to, because I found a better place. A smaller apartment in a cooperative building managed by a non-profit housing association. Lower rent, proper maintenance contracts, a tenants committee that met quarterly. The heating worked. I tested it on the first cold morning after I moved in. 22 degrees at 6 in the morning. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the thermometer and felt something I had not felt in a long time, which was simply nothing. Not relief, not triumph, just nothing, in the good sense. The absence of dread. I packed the last of my things from Feldkampstrasse on a Saturday in December. The apartment looked different, empty, smaller. The ceiling mouldings I had liked when I first moved in were still there, still fine, still making the place look better than it was. The bathroom corner where the mould had been was freshly painted. Someone had done that before showing the apartment to new tenants. I wondered if the new tenants knew. I hoped they would find out, if they needed to. I took the thermometer off the kitchen windowsill, the same €3 thermometer I had bought at the hardware store on the corner 11 months earlier. I put it in my bag. I locked the apartment door for the last time and dropped the keys through the letterbox slot in the building entrance. I heard them hit the floor on the other side. I walked out into the December morning. It was cold and grey and fine. I want to tell you one more thing, because it is the part that matters most to me now. After the forum, after the newspaper article, after the court ruling, I started getting messages. From other tenants, not just from Voss's buildings, but from across the city. People who had read about the case, who had their own folders, their own mould, their own temperature logs, their own landlords who used the phrase force of circumstances. People who did not know where to start, or whether it was worth it, or whether anyone would listen. I started helping them. Not as a lawyer, not as an expert, as someone who had done it. I connected them to Claudia and Mieterhilfe. I helped them organize their documentation. I told them, write down the date, the temperature, the time. Write it every day. Keep the receipts. Keep the letters. Keep the original listing. Do not stop. I still work night shifts. I still take the bus home in the pale grey, early morning light. But when I get home now, the apartment is warm. And when I sit down at the kitchen table, the folder in my desk drawer is empty. I kept one thing from it, the original apartment listing, the one that described the apartment as fully modernized, energy efficient, equipped with a contemporary heating system. I kept it not out of anger. I kept it as a reminder that the gap between what someone tells you and what is actually true is exactly the distance you have to measure, document, and prove. Rainer Voss lost the subsidy. He lost 3 rent proceedings. He lost the press profile and the gala photos and the gold lettering on the office door, which I heard later was quietly removed. He lost, most importantly, the operating assumption that people like me would stay quiet because staying quiet felt like the only option. He was wrong about that. And he was very wrong about the easy-to-replace part. I have been a nurse for 9 years. I have worked nights and weekends and holidays. I have been in rooms where the difference between life and death was whether someone paid attention, kept records, and did not give up. I paid attention. I kept records. I did not give up. That is the whole story. That is all it ever was.